Good morning to all of you. What a delight and joy it is to be here. And I'm so excited that you have taken time from your busy schedules to be with us. Americans are always busy, even when we have nothing to do. But it is my hope and prayer that all of you would benefit from what you've already heard and what you will yet hear today. I count it really an honor and privilege to be part of this very important conference. I take it all of you have overnighted in some hotel somewhere on this planet, and you go to your hotel room and you open up a drawer and you see a book, the Gideon's Bible. For the most part, some hotels are now trying to avoid it, and some hotels are replacing it with the Buddhist scriptures or Hindu scriptures and so on. Anyhow, you all know Gideon's. Well, my grandfather, Pandit Sharma Mahabir Maharaj, was a high priest in Benares, the holy city of India. What Mecca is to the Muslims, Benares is to the Hindus. And the holiest of all rivers in all the world flows through holy Benares. So my grandfather was something of the top dog in this holy city as a Hindu holy man. But he was a very zealous Hindu. He wanted to spread Hinduism on the one hand, but he also was very keen to take the Hindu scriptures to the Hindus of the diaspora. Nice Greek word, first used of the Jews who were scattered. So we also have the Indian diaspora, thanks to the great British people. Great Britain. There will always be a Great Britain. And you know, I was speaking at the university here in California, UCLA. Auditorium was packed. I had a world map up front. I'm afraid I don't use PowerPoint, but I'm here to point you to the source of all powers. And I had a map, and I asked any two students to volunteer and to come up front, and without having to look for it, put your index finger on Great Britain, England. Two students hesitated. UCLA. You know how good we are at geography here in the United States. Two students hesitantly volunteered and came up front, and one fellow, the first fellow, literally ran his finger around Italy, you know, that big boot, and he said, I know England is somewhere out here in the waters. UCLA student. And eventually he found it. Well, the point is, England is this tiny country, an island, and England had colonies all over the world, as you know. The Queen is still on the Australian dollar, the Queen is still on the Canadian dollar, New Zealand, Fiji, Guyana, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, South Africa. Even the United States was a British colony. And you can hardly find England on a world map if you ask a UCLA student to do it. But England, the British folks took Indians from British India to a number of their colonies. Trinidad is the last island in the West Indies. Almost half of Trinidad is Indian. They were brought there by the British after slavery was abolished. The English people have a sweet tooth, we are told, and they have to have their sugar. And the Indians knew how to make sugar. They made it at home. Guyana in South America, an English-speaking country, 50% is Indian. Fiji out in the Pacific, 50% Indian. So the British took people to the colonies. My grandfather, Pandit Sharma Maharaj, ventured out from Benares. He raised money in India, bought Hindu Bibles, Hindu scriptures, the Gita, Vedas, Mahabharata, Upanishads, loaded it up in the ship in the docks in Calcutta, and journeyed all the way to the West Indies, British West Indies, to Trinidad, and then to Guyana on the mainland, and Suriname, former Dutch Guyana. That expresses a little bit to you the zeal for Hinduism in our own family. My father, like my grandfather, was a Hindu priest. We were Brahmins. In Hinduism, there is a caste system. It's religious. And the highest caste is the Brahmin caste. The caste system can be represented by the body. The Brahmins were the head, the brain. And you can only become a Hindu priest if you're born Brahmin. You can only become a yogi, a swami, a spiritual leader if you're born Brahmin. So you're very privileged. The Brahmins are worshipped. People worship my grandfather, they worship my father, they worship me. They bowed at my feet, they brought their gifts and offerings, and gifted me with their gifts and offerings in order to be blessed, so that I could build their karma, so they could have a better reincarnation. Reincarnation comes out of Hinduism. Now, my guess is over 25% of Americans, if not more, believe in reincarnation. It is that almost 50% of Germans now believe in reincarnation. It comes out of Hinduism. But it didn't happen overnight. The idea of karma, law and effect, a cause and effect, the law of cause and effect, which comes from Hinduism, is now very prevalent. To a certain extent, yes, it's true, what you sow you reap. The Bible even says so, but in a very different sense. You see in the Bible, in the book of Galatians, Paul wrote, "Whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap," if I could quote the King James here, which most of you are acquainted with. In Hinduism, what you sow you reap, full stop. In Christianity, what you sow you reap, hyphen. Forgiveness and grace. Big difference here. In Hinduism, no forgiveness, no grace. So Hindus are afraid of the beyond, of life after death. Where am I going? Am I going to reincarnate into a cockroach? Am I going to come back as a mosquito, or a bug, a pig, or whatever? You know, I lived in Germany for a while, and I used to tease my German friends. I said, you know, you Germans, you're all coming back as pigs. You've got to be careful when you say the word pig in Germany, because if you add to the word pig, it becomes a swear word, literally. And they were shocked at first. I said, well, you know, according to Hinduism, some of you, you're turning to Hinduism, you're turning to New Age. New Age teaches reincarnation. Go ahead, believe in it. Just know that since you Germans, you love sausage and ham and all that good stuff, well, if you eat a pig, you'll come back as a pig. You kill a mosquito, you'll come back as a mosquito. It's prevalent, this idea, all over the West today. It didn't happen overnight. So my father and grandfather, they were Brahmin leaders. My father was a guru, like my grandfather. Guru has different definitions, but the word guru means divine teacher. Guru is like God. There are several gurus. Not everybody can become a guru. You have to live the life. You have to follow the discipline and so on. So I was trained at a very early age to be a Hindu spiritual leader, to be a young yogi, practicing yoga, expert at yoga. My father was a yogi because he was an expert of yoga. And at the earliest age, I got into it. My mother, who is a very religious Hindu till this day, the first thing she taught me was yoga. The first thing as a religious Hindu lady. I still remember it. She taught me to sit properly in the lotus position, yogi position. Dean did a great job. Thank you. You did a fabulous job explaining and expressing the whole thing about yoga and Hinduism. Well, I had to also learn to sit holding out my hands the right way, touching the fingers the right way, index finger and thumb. She taught me meditation. She taught me the mantras. She taught me all about the gods, Krishna, Rama, Shiva, Vishnu, etc. Now, my father practiced yoga, various forms of yoga. But my father taught me nothing. because he got so deep into yoga, so deep into it that he became an ascetic. It took him over completely. It was not, I think, his intention, but this is what happened. My mother is a very beautiful woman, a wonderful woman. She married very young. The Hindus, they marry off their daughters. A woman, a girl, is a handicap in the Hindu culture, a handicap. The moment the child is born and it's a girl, you have a problem. Your question is, where do I find the money for the dowry? And now in the villages in India, people can't read and write. 98% are illiterate, but they have the sonogram. They have the equipment to do the sonogram, and if it's a girl, they abort. Because a girl is a handicap. So my mother was married off very young. My father was somewhat much older, already famous, and a Hindu leader and a priest. And my father got so deep into yoga that he became an ascetic. He renounced the world completely, and he made several religious vows. We don't have time to get into all of it. You could read it in my book, Death of a Guru. This is now in 72 languages, about 5 million copies in print worldwide. I don't have $1 in my pocket from this book. It's mostly royalty-free so that the publishers would sell it cheap, and so poor people and students could afford it. Not that I don't need the money, of course. We all need money to pay the bills, but it's royalty-free for the most part. And I go into greater details in this book about my father and his life as a guru and as a practicant of yoga, as a master of yoga. And so one of the vows he took was a vow of silence. Vow of silence. He never uttered a word right after he married my mother. So I never heard my father's voice, not even once. He also vowed not to cut his hair. For the Hindus, the hair is sacred. And one day, long story short, he also vowed not to have any marital contact, any conjugal contact, right after the marriage. Mother was a virgin. But 9 months later, somehow, anyhow, I was born. For my mother, that was a big mystery. But I'm glad to be here. And I grew up in this atmosphere, and I watched my father sit as this yogi, meditating all day long. And meditation is a form of yoga. It's part of yoga. Meditating. And he was in another world, deep in trance. So one day, somehow, they would try to help him to get out of this lifestyle. You know, it's time to take on your responsibility as husband and as father. And they called the barber and asked for his hair to be cut. And the moment they cut my father's hair, he fell back and died on the spot. True story. There are thousands of people in India who would tell you, Hindus, when they broke their vow to some god, and we have 333 million gods, tragedy struck. They lost an arm, a limb, the house was razed to the ground, etc. Close relative died in a fatal crash right after they broke their vow. Now, you may say coincidence, but you can't keep saying coincidence. Somewhere you have to draw the line. Friends, my point is there are spiritual powers in our world. They are real. We here in the West have done brilliantly to deny some of the realities in our world. We put on that little thing they give you on the airplane to put over your eyes when you want to go to sleep. We love it. We've done it so well. And especially in the church. There is power. But there are two sources of power. One, there's God who created all this world and you and me. But there is also Satan, and he also has power. And I can tell you about that because as a religious Hindu, I experienced spiritual power in my own life. I knew that there were demons before I read a word in the Bible, the Christian Bible. I knew about the presence and power of demons in Hinduism. And I saw people having disastrous ends when they broke their vow, such as my own father. I'm not making this up. He broke his vow, not deliberately. His hair was cut. He had vowed not to speak, so he could not defend himself, having taken a vow of silence. And he died. He fell back and died on the spot. For me, that was a great loss. My father, the God, is now dead. I was 7 years old. He had lived like this for 8 years, unflinchingly, uncompromisingly, in that very way as an ascetic. He stayed in the same room on a wooden bed of his choice for spiritual discipline's sake. You sit in the lotus position on wood. The hard life. To reach your goal, his goal was called moksha, deliverance from time, space, and the elements. His goal was called self-realization. His goal was God realization. In Hinduism, for those of you who like to say all religions have the same truth and the same goal and the same God, and friends, it is the biggest lie in the universe today. It sounds wonderful and friendly and harmonious and peaceful and all that. You know, I am very, very, very pro-love. And I'm very pro-harmony. And I'm very pro-unity. But I'm also very pro-truth. Mahatma Gandhi believed that all religions had the same truth. He taught it, he preached it, he said it, he wrote it. Dean pointed out the word Atman. The individual soul. And then there's the word Brahman. The universal soul. All is Brahman. That's one of the first things I was taught as a Hindu. All is one. All is divine. Pantheism. But Atman and Brahman are one and the same in Hindu philosophy. So you are God, somehow you forgot it in one of your previous reincarnations, and now your goal is to realize your divinity, to realize you are God. So Atman, from that word, Mahatma Gandhi got his title. Mahatma was not his name, it was a title. Mahatma, great soul, Mahatma Gandhi. One of the greatest Indians who ever lived. Great feats he accomplished. But he was also a great failure. He never changed the caste system. Millions and millions and millions suffer till this day because of the caste system. Because we have over 300 million low caste represented by the foot. They are nobodies, non-entities. They cannot go to school. They don't have any health care. Can't go to the hospital. The Dalits, the untouchables. In fact, those are the low caste. Then you have the untouchables. Lower than the low caste. They are under the foot. That's another 320 million or so. Nobodies because of the caste system. Gandhi did not do a thing for that problem, which still exists today. You heard about the two girls, the cousins who were raped, teenagers raped. They are low caste people. The rapist hung them. And the father went to the police station to report, my daughter is missing. The police chased him away because he was low caste. They didn't help. Disastrous story. Read it. Google it and read it. You'll be so shocked. But the same Mahatma Gandhi, who taught all religions have the same truth and the same goal and the same God in the end. You know what he wrote in his autobiography? I know about autobiography. I wrote my own. I wasn't going to wait for anybody else to write it because people write a bunch of inexactitudes when they write your biography for you. I know me. I know my life. I know where I came from and I know what I've experienced. So I wrote my own autobiography. I could stand for every single word and sentence in this book because I wrote it. Gandhi wrote in his own autobiography, pardon the emphasis, all my life I have sought truth, but I never found it. Tragic. Why? Because of that previous statement. All religions have the same truth and the same God and the same goal in the end. And unfortunately, that is what all the millions of New Agers in this country and in Europe believe. And it didn't happen overnight. You know when it started? Roughly, significantly in 1893. a Calcutta Hindu guru by the name of Vivekananda came to this country and spoke in Chicago at the Parliament of World Religions, first one ever in the West. And he proclaimed that same message that Gandhi taught. All religions have the same truth. It's only expressed in different forms. Go out into all the world, he challenged the delegates, and preach it. And Americans heard that message for the first time, and many started doing just that. Before 1893, perhaps 99% of Euro-Americans, not the native Indians, believed that Christianity was the right way. Believed that Jesus was the right way, whether they lived it or not, whether they went to church or not. But the great majority, definitely over 95% of Americans, believed that Christianity was the right way. That has changed. Over in Europe, we had Spinoza, philosophy. You know what Spinoza said? There is only one substance and it's all divine. He was influenced by Hinduism. Wagner, of the classical music world, was influenced by Hinduism. Hermann Hesse of the literature world was influenced by Hinduism. I can name 100 different famous European names. Here in the United States, we had the New England transcendentalists like Emerson and Thoreau. They fell head over heels for Hinduism and taught it in their speeches and in their literature. And it continues to spread. Now, after Vivekananda, there came Yogananda. He came to Hollywood. He was very clever. And he used the Bible, and he used Bible verses to teach Hinduism. And the Hollywood people, they didn't know the Bible. They didn't know Christianity well enough. You know, they had their own secular, sensual life. But they were empty, and they were looking for something. We're all empty until we find the living God. Augustine said it, you know. There's a God-shaped vacuum in all of us that we're trying to fill. We only find satisfaction, true satisfaction, when God fills that God-shaped vacuum in us. So in Hollywood, Yogananda, he was teaching self-realization. And why self-realization? To reach God-realization. So look into yourself. In fact, his organization is called the Self-Realization Society. You can Google it and you'll see lots and lots of information about the Self-Realization Society right here in California and all over America and all over the world. He wrote that very influential book, The Autobiography of a Yogi. And I have met people who told me after they have read that book, they don't need to read anything else. That book is a very, very powerful book. But it is pointing you in the direction that my grandfather went and my father went and I was going. To look into the self, to find the true self, to find that the self is God. No Christian in his right mind would say we all are divine, we just need to find our divinity. No Christian in his right mind would say the self is God. My mantra as a Hindu, all mantras are in Sanskrit, the holy language of Hinduism, was Aham Brahma Asmi. It means translated, I am God, which I chanted over and over and over and over tens of thousands of times. I would fall asleep with those words on my lip. I would wake up in the morning and start saying those words, I am God, until I began to believe it. I went to my auntie on vacation. This was in the West Indies. She lived out in the country. I used to love to go to Aunt Sumintra because her husband owned a lot of lands out in the country. And I would stand in the veranda early morning and I would meditate and I would pass my hand from right to left and left to right and I would say, literally, I created it all. I created the hills. I would look onto these beautiful hills in the countryside, the mountains, and I would say, I created it all. I did it every morning on vacation. And one morning, suddenly, it dawned on me, wait a minute, Rabi, when did you create it all? I couldn't remember, and I felt like a god with Alzheimer's. The Maharishi came to the West later on. John Lennon brought him over here. And he taught transcendental meditation. He said it's a science, nothing to do with religion. And he won millions of people, and he made millions of dollars. Guess what? It was religion. I partook in a court case where we prove in court that transcendental meditation is Hinduism. Dean mentioned it earlier on. Maharishi knew that he was teaching Jnana Yoga. There are different levels of yoga, different kinds of yoga. And he knew very well as a Hindu holy man that he was teaching Jnana Yoga, and the goal to realize your divinity. Two things I observed when I talked to transcendental meditation folks. They had lost the sense of social concern. They said they are now beyond that. They laughed at me because I was rehabilitating drug addicts and dropouts in Europe from the universities. They laughed at me. They say, oh, we're way beyond that. Because in Hinduism, you don't have to worry about people's poverty and people's needs. It's all their karma. That's their own doings. Don't worry about them. And secondly, I noticed a great sense of pride, the wrong kind of pride. They were very pompous and very arrogant. If you ask me, I would tell you the greatest ego trip in the entire universe is when somebody begins to believe that he is God, he is divine. And I felt sorry for those transcendental meditation people. And once you get into any form of yoga, you eventually would embrace reincarnation. And once you embrace reincarnation, you give up any belief in resurrection. Let me tell you, reincarnation and resurrection cannot both be true at the same time. Either the one or the other. Jesus did not reincarnate, he resurrected triumphantly. We just celebrated Easter, and we were reminded of that. And my grandmother, who was a religious Hindu, became a believer in Jesus. And when she died, I did not bawl and sob like so many of my Hindu friends when their Hindu relatives died. You know, I was sorry to lose my precious, wonderful grandmother, but I rejoiced knowing that one day I would see her again because of the belief in resurrection. You know, my grandmother was vegetarian, and one day I went into the room, I saw her eating a piece of chicken, and I thought, oh no, she was hiding, secretly eating a piece of chicken. Oh no, Grandma is going to come back as a chicken. You kill a cockroach, you'll come back as a cockroach. You know what? If reincarnation is true, you're never going to meet each other again unless cockroach meets chicken. When my grandmother died, I knew she went to heaven, and I knew that I would see her again one day. It's the only religion, the only faith in the world that gives you that kind of hope. So what I'm trying to tell you here, my friends, before I wrap up, you have all these gurus who have come to the West, teaching the different kinds of yoga. Prabhupada Bhaktivedanta Swami came from Calcutta to New York, and then his religion he started in New York City, spread all over the world. He didn't start a religion, really. He brought a form of Hinduism. The Hare Krishnas, you know what they practice? Bhakti Yoga. It's a form of yoga. They worship Krishna, the Hindu god. They focus on Krishna. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna. You hear it over and over. In that song, My Sweet Lord, George Harrison, My Sweet Lord, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna. It's in that song that was played all over the world. And then you have Rajneesh, who brought Tantric Yoga. Union with Brahman through sexual perversion. Rajneesh said the more pervert, the better your chance of unifying with Brahman. And then there was Muktananda, my mother's own guru, over in Bombay. He was teaching Kundalini Yoga that Dean Broyles alluded to. All about that serpent. The serpent is asleep at the base of the spine between the anus and the genital. And you need to wake up that serpent, and that serpent moves through these zones, chakra zones, and eventually gets up to what Hindus believe is the third eye, where you reach. Then you reach your divinity. You're divine now. It takes Satan to invent something like that. And you know what shocks me? Millions of people today admire and follow Dr. Oz on television. He has a lot of good stuff, a lot of health information and all that. One day I wasn't well, and I was laying on our couch at home in the living room, and I turned the TV on, and Dr. Oz was on. Actually, it was at night time. I was very uncomfortable, went to the living room. Dr. Oz came on very late. I could not believe this highly educated popular, significant doctor was teaching millions of people in America and all over the world about chakras. There's no scientific evidence for chakras. There's no scientific base for it, but yet we gullibly swallow it up. And all these women in the audience and a handful of men nodding, agreeing. It's very subtle. It's the name of the game. It's Satan's approach for these last days. Subtlety, subtlety, subtlety. Satan comes as an angel of light. He doesn't come with a tail and two horns. And it's all about health and fitness and looking good and feeling good. A daughter of wonderful friends of mine came back home from college recently. And I know the family very well. I've been to their home. I played with this little girl when she was tiny, picked her up, scooped her up, hugged her, kissed her. And I asked her, what was the best thing about college, your first semester? She said, yoga. It's an evangelical Christian home. I said, tell me about it. She said, well, what was the best thing about it? She said, well, now I'm centered. So in conversation, you know what I discovered? This centered thing is all about finding the true self. It's the goal of yoga. And now she's found that true self. She's found God. She doesn't need anything else. She doesn't need Jesus. From an evangelical leadership home, she doesn't even need Jesus anymore because she's found, they use the word centered, she's found it. It's sad, it's tragic, it's heartbreaking. It's deceptive, my dear friends. It starts very harmless, seemingly harmless. Hatha yoga, of course, is the biggest yoga in America, which you find all over the place, church halls and schools. You've heard from Dean. Yoga is all about union, like the yoke to oxen. I'm going to end now, but I must share this with you before I close. It's all about yoking. In Hinduism, yoking with Brahman. Realizing that you and Brahman are one. You are divine. And it's deception, because we are not God. Yet an intelligent, brilliant, talented lady like Shirley MacLaine could make a movie telling the world she's God. Out on a limb. A friend of mine wrote a book in response, out on a broken limb. And it's part of the darkness spreading in our world. It is part of the darkness spreading in our world. Krishna in the Gita, who's becoming very popular in the West as a god to worship, Krishna in the Gita says, I am light. Well, Jesus also said that, didn't he? But Krishna goes on to say, I am also darkness. There's some truth in the Gita. I'm light, but I'm also darkness. Everything evil that happened in this world, I am. All Hitler's Holocaust, I am that. Do you want to be part of that? I don't. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. The only true light. And this Jesus warned us in Matthew chapter 24. See that no one deceive you. He could have gone on talking about the earthquakes and so on we will see in the last days. But he said, see that no one deceive you. There's plenty of deception going on today. 3 times in that passage, my wife was reminding me this morning, 3 times in Matthew 24, he warned us, don't let anyone deceive you. I was hacked. My wife was hacked. I was hacked. I was in Austin speaking at the university. My wife calls me from Pasadena. She said, honey, you better sit down. I said, what's going on? She says, I turned on the computer. I went to your Juno. I had Juno. I have Gmail now. She said, it's all gone. Everything is gone. They wiped it out. They stole it and they used it against me. My whole address list. They used it against me. They sent out letters to my people telling people awful things about me. I lost it all. I had to start all over. Retrieve, and it was very hard. My wife, she got hacked. It was a terrible experience for us. This planet is being hacked on a large scale by the enemy who also has power. Don't let him deceive you. I lost everything internetly speaking. Satan wants us to lose everything spiritually speaking. God is there for us. He's with us, the true and living God, if you have him in your life, that is. Christ came and died on a cross and shed his blood for your sake and my sake, and the Bible says the blood of Jesus Christ cleanses us from all sin. I have Christ. I don't need all the benefits, so to speak, of yoga. Yes, I exercise. Yes, I walk. But you know, this body we're working so much at and spending so much money on, all these courses and stuff we're taking, it's going to die one day. But we'll have to face God in judgment. It is appointed unto all men to die once, not 100 times, but to die once, and after death comes the judgment of God. And he wants to see us through that judgment. We just need to look to him. I thank you for listening so attentively. God bless you all.